Okay, great. Good evening, everyone.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Parminder. Sue, nice to be with you. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. My name is Mason Jenkins, and I work in spiritual care. I'm in charge of spiritual care at Valley Hospital, like Parm said. So Sue and I are going to talk to you today about grief in the time of COVID. So right from the start, I just wanted to make sure that we understand that this is a really broad topic. We're not just talking about uh, those who've lost a loved one, perhaps, and the grief you might be feeling or that they might be feeling. So there's a pandemic, right? And widespread illness, change to our lives um, across the globe. Things have been unlike anything we've seen in our lifetimes. So there's the medical piece of that, but there's also psychological piece, even a spiritual piece. And then beyond that, there's financial piece, there's, our economy. Um, so each of us experiences these things in our own way. And well, you may not identify as someone who is experiencing a grief at this time. What we want to do right from the start here is just to recognize that no one has been untouched by this pandemic, and that, you know, even if you feel like you're far from some of the worst suffering that you've seen in the news or, heard about, none of us has been untouched. And when we talk about grief, I really do believe that we're talking about something that each and every one of us is experiencing in our own personal way, uh, as well as something we're all experiencing together collectively. So like it says here, there's a collective anxiety and grief that has changed, day to day, week to week, throughout this whole thing. So much uncertainty about the future. As Americans, we're accustomed to feeling in control of our lives, being able to make choices about where we go and what we do, and having basic freedoms. So being so restricted in our day-to-day lives has been unbelievable, and it's nothing that any of us could have expected. And so each of us has had to cope in our own way.
Mhm.
And I'm sure I don't have to tell you how hard this has been for people. So we're going to talk a bit about the psychological component, and just to accentuate that each of us has lost, you know, a variety of things
Mhm.
throughout this whole year. Well, we're going to present you with some information today about grief, about the psychological, spiritual components of coronavirus and the grief related to it. We also want you to just tune in to what's going on for yourself. Recognize that grief is not something that's out there, that's separate from you. Recognize that this is a hard time, and we need to be together. We need to support each other. We've got to be gentle with ourselves and those we love. And we've got to recognize that we're all grieving for things that we've lost, people we've lost, privileges we've lost, sense of identity, so much. So I just invite you to um, be gentle with yourselves this evening. Sue and I are going to do our best to convey this information to you in an empathic and a caring way, help you understand that grief is difficult, but it's not something that we have to be afraid of. And if something that we're really obliged to turn towards and work with, or else we will suffer more.
Yes.
So I think pass it over to Sue for the next little bit.
All right. Thanks, Mason. So, sort of the this is all very overwhelming, very daunting. And I think, we're going to talk about a lot of different losses, but it would be remiss of us not to talk about the loss of life, kind of put things in perspective as to why, even though we may not have lost anyone in particular or personally, or maybe not even have gotten sick with the virus, this is what's happening. This is what's on the news. This is our state right now. And there's been 2,139,741 lives lost as of January 26th. So it's a couple days old. No doubt there's been more. And just 421 deaths in the United States, just in the United States, I should say. And in Jersey, there's been almost 21,000. So it's so overwhelming. It's just so unfathomable and almost difficult to comprehend. And I think sometimes, we can certainly, and I do this too, we watch Netflix or we, keep busy or try to get lost in a book not to think about this. But the fact is, that is what's going on and what has gone on. And we're feeling the effects of that, whether we like it or not. I love the statement, if you don't deal with your feelings, they kind of deal with you. And this is very real regarding what's happened. So yes, the vaccine offers hope, but this pandemic continues, as we all know. Certainly gonna, focus on hope tonight, and but just so you know, that's what we're dealing with. But of course, as Mason just said, and I'm going to go to the next slide for us to kind of elaborate. There's so many other losses, very kind of ambiguous, like kind of less clear, yet very profound. So Mason, I'm going to let you talk about this a little bit, if you will.
Yeah, we're getting hit from every angle, right? So some people have lost jobs, the economy, our sort of American sense of prosperity and security has been threatened. This predictability piece, this being able to plan vacations, being able to think ahead to when you might see your grandchildren or your parents. Sense of safety, belief that we can protect our children and elderly folks. Not knowing for so long we still don't. Everybody has a sort of a different interpretation of exactly what I need to do for my life to keep me safe, right? We get information from the CDC, from Dr. Fauci, from professionals in our community, but then it's up to each of us as individuals to make decisions. And there's been friction within families, where one part of the family feels that you got to be more strict. Another part of the family wants to be able to see people. My parents were going out to go to church, before I was really comfortable with that, but that was something that was really important to them. So we've each had to make our own choices about like our own personal safety and priorities. This loss of, basic health. If for those, a lot of folks have gotten sick. I think the further it's gone along, the more people we know personally that are sick or have been sick, and it's frightening, right? That's a scary prospect. This social interactions has been hard. As humans, we are really, we have succeeded as a species because we can work together, because we can, take on challenges as a community. From our time, of being tribal creatures to today, social interaction is just part of who we are as humans. And, honestly, the interactions we have over the computer they're helpful and they are a way to stay connected, but it's not the same as being with people that we love, right? Being able to go out to dinner, being able to relax, go to the movies. As far as social determinants of health go, isolation is more associated with death than like obesity, smoking, diabetes, like other things that you would think of as really limiting your life. Being alone, not having social interactions, and that's what we've been seeing in nursing homes and other, long-term care facilities, is that folks have been really isolated, and it's been very hard on those populations. So we are social creatures, and hopefully something we can take out of this is just recognizing how important it is that we maintain regular connection with other people. So we're dealing with the loss of that. These rituals, these moments of celebration in life, these guideposts that help us to structure who we are and the passage of time. My parents were celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary last summer, and we were planning this great big family reunion. Everybody was going to get together, and of course that had to be canceled. You know, Graduations, weddings, holidays. It's all been, in the garage around a portable heater, or, just a couple of people in the house. This has been, these are the things that we look to orient our lives, right? So there's a fundamental disorientation. Who are we without these regular events to mark the passage of time, to come together as a family and see that I am not just myself, I am also this community. That's a difficult one. These other things that are part of who we are as a way of life. For so many people, sports are huge. Schools closing has been such a burden. It's been such a hardship on young children. And I have young children, so that's who I'm especially attuned to. I know it's been hard on everybody, but not having school has been difficult. Simply doing errands. You got to think through where you're going to go and what you're going to do, and can I go here and there. Yeah, basic freedoms that we enjoy as people living in a free country in the 21st century. So a lot of that stuff has been disrupted. And I've touched on this too, this loss of identity. So much of who we are is tied up in these events, these things that we do, a certain level of productivity that we have. We are really a people that likes to be productive and do things and be on the move and be busy, and maybe to a fault, and maybe there's something to learn in all of this about slowing down and forming an identity that's based in something other than what I'm able to accomplish in my busy day-to-day, recognizing there's something innately meaningful and special within each of us doesn't require a laundry list of tasks to prove its worth. So these are all losses, and this is what I mean when I see each and every one of us has been touched by this, that
I remember,
yeah.
Thank you, Mason. I remember last spring when this all started, and I'm very attached to my work family and going to my office, the work I do. And I remember it was about a week in, and we couldn't be together, and we were trying to work from home or working from different places within the Valley system. And I remember waking up with such a profound feeling of sadness. Like everything kind of looked gray. And a couple other, feelings, just like physically not feeling well. And I had read an article, it was probably around the end of March, so it was a couple weeks in, and it said that feeling you're experiencing right now is grief. Even though at that point I had not lost anyone, I had not yet been sick, but I felt this profound sense of grief. And a lot of people have spoken about that, especially as time gone on. Like, what's wrong with me? Why do I have no energy, or ambition, or just feeling sort of so sad? And it really has been such a shift for many people. Again, if you lose someone directly or something, that's I don't want to say it's more tangible, but there's all these other things that are contributing to this feeling of grief and that loss of identity, who we are. I'm a worker who goes to my job every day. Our retirees that were volunteering, and that's such a big part of who they were. They found themselves at home. How challenging. Kids in school, same thing. So these ambiguous losses have been very overwhelming, very difficult.
If we could stay here for just a second, Sue. I'm aware that this is a difficult conversation to have, and I want to make sure that we recognize, and we have located it later in our presentation, that there is area for growth and learning and joy to peek through even amidst the grief and the difficulty and the sadness. But I'm just aware, just looking at this list, that we could, if we could think of each one of these, just, and think about maybe something that's, we could identify as an area of growth. So just by way of example, this stable economy, jobs, and security. A lot of people have been struggling to put food on the table. People are without jobs. And the neighborhood where I live in the Bronx. I live in the Kingsbridge section of the Bronx. These friendly fridges have been put up. So at different places throughout the neighborhood, people have gotten fridges on the sidewalk. I'm not sure how they're getting power, but whoever has the means brings food and puts them in the fridge on the shelves there. Whoever needs stuff comes and gets food from the fridge. And this is, it's just a tangible way that we recognize that we're all bound together and that there are people struggling. I remember, my wife and I, we both work, and we're both very fortunate to have work. And at the beginning of the pandemic, a bunch of our expenses went away because we weren't having the sitter come. So we were actually, we were doing pretty well. And then the stimulus comes from the government, and we're like, why are we getting this? Right. And so figuring out a good way to help put that into the community in a way that helps, a local food bank or somebody that's struggling. I feel like we've seen how we're bound together, and that's something that's grown out of that loss. I think these social interactions is a really big one, where we can see, with so much that's been taken away from us, that what's really valuable to us is the people that we love in our lives and the relationships that we foster. And so often that stuff takes a back seat to our work, or, our busyness, our chores, whatever it is we do day to day. And being able to recognize, like, this is what's most important in my life. This is what, when I get back to being able to live my life, I want to put my love with my children, my parents, my family, my best friends, my work friends. Those are the things I really want to put emphasis on. And so just a couple of thoughts about how some of these particular areas, there's been room for growth and learning, even while there is loss
and perspective. It set a lot of things in perspective, which I think has been extremely valuable. All right, so we're going to get into kind of, Mason, if you could kind of go over a little bit about this very, very profound challenge that we had regarding the dying process in COVID-19, and just the hospital. I know you were very involved.
Yeah. So being at the hospital every day throughout this whole pandemic has been incredibly trying. It's been a really difficult place to be. There's been an incredible sense of purpose and connection and mutual support that has grown up within that struggle. But it's still a day-to-day struggle with sadness and uncertainty. Some of the things we have listed here. So these visitor restrictions in the hospital and at nursing facilities have been really stressful on folks. And, not only does your loved one have to go to the hospital, but then in addition, they can't have anybody with them, right? So at this point, we're not permitting any visitors in to the hospital, except when it's the end of life or something like that. So that's been a real hardship for people. And nursing facilities, as we know, were hit really hard in the first wave of the pandemic, a lot of deaths in those places. And as a consequence, they had to just lock down. So if you had somebody you loved that was living in one of these facilities, maybe you were doing a window visit, my parents would go, I don't know, they would have Manhattans with their friend through a window. I'm not sure how they got the Manhattans into her, but that was their ritual. There's also this difficulty of, we've had a lot of people die here in the hospital, and we continue to have people die. And for so many of them not to be able to have their loved ones present is a real hardship on the patients. Dying of COVID, for the most part, are not aware of what's going on at the moment of their death because of the difficulty breathing. Um, they're mostly unconscious for the latter period of their hospitalization with us here. But the family members are aware of what's going on. And so sometimes they're here at the bedside. We get them all suited up and we bring them into the room. And a lot of times we just have them on a tablet, on an iPad. We bring the tablet into the room so that they can say goodbye to their loved one. And what that means is that the nursing staff and the nurses' aides, who are already carrying such a load in this pandemic of caring for everyone, now they're also carrying this incredible emotional and moral load of being the conduit for all of the sadness and grief between families and loved ones. And that has been an incredible weight for folks to carry around here. And for Sue and I, in our work here in the hospital and throughout the health system, we have been prioritizing caring for staff because we know that this is such a huge thing that has been asked of them. It's not just, caring for the living, it's also being there and caring for the dying, maybe being the only person that is with somebody when they die. That's a real hardship. And that's what we mean when we say medical staff are really trying to fill the void. We've gotten really creative. I think we've made really good use of technology, bringing a tablet into the room so that a family can say goodbye, can see their loved one, can speak to them. I've had a couple of interactions where I had a family rabbi on the tablet and the rest of the family was on there as well, and we took the tablet into the room so that the rabbi could say the prayers for the dying, and the family could be there to hear the prayers and to be with their mother or their aunt who was dying. I also recently had another one where there was a fella in his 50s who was dying, and his mother was here in the hospital, and I was with her and the doctor helping her. We were helping her to make the transition towards comfort care because it didn't appear that anything else we could do was going to save this fellow's life. And I had also been talking to his pastor. He's an Episcopalian fellow, and I had developed a nice relationship with his pastor. We're not letting clergy into the hospital right now, but Episcopalians have a particular prayer ritual said, around the end of life. So I got the pastor on the tablet and I took him into the room to be with the patient. The mother had a spouse at home who's also older and not well, so she didn't want to go into the room and risk bringing COVID home to him. So she's outside the window with a baby monitor. We use baby monitors from the room to outside the room so that the patients can communicate with the staff without the staff having to go in there and gown up. So I had the pastor on the tablet. I'm holding the tablet and I've got the baby monitor pulled over so it's right next to the tablet. I can see the mother through the window, and I've got the patient right here on the ventilator still, approaching the end of his life. And it was a really amazing interaction. The presence of the pastor there with him was really meaningful. And, this fellow was not conscious per se, but for him to have the voice of his pastor who he knew well, saying the prayers of his church there with him, and to have his mother there as well, able to witness and hear those prayers, it was so moving for me. It was not only a burden, not only a hardship, but also just an incredible privilege and an incredible honor to be there. One of my colleagues the other day said, the more sadness I feel in my heart, the more I feel the ability to love, right? So that as the sadness grows up, really what that is, it's a recognition of our connection to one another, and that the sadness grows with our love, right? They're bound together. We cannot separate the two. So if our inclination is to constantly push away the sadness and to turn away from it and to look away from it, we risk severing our connection with other humans. We risk diminishing the love that we're able to feel for one another. um, leaving the room with the tablet, taking the tablet to this mother so that the pastor could support her. Uh, it felt like he was there with her. He was able to talk to her in this moment of her son's, last hours. Um, and this woman was just so touched by the work that we were doing for her. And she expressed that she felt that we were angels and that this was the kingdom of heaven in the midst. We were just in the midst of it. And just an incredible thing to witness. And, we've done everything we can here. And there's a great sense of a feeling of futility. And I recognize that within myself as a symptom of compassion fatigue, of, a traumatic stress reaction, feeling like we're not able to do what we want to do. And I'm sure many of you feel that too. If you've got somebody in your community or in your family who's struggling, you want to be able to be there for them. You want to go over there. You want to hug them. You want to support them. There's this feeling of, God, I feel that there's something I could be doing, and I can't do it. I don't know what to do. And that, Sue and I have heard that from a lot of staff that we've talked to, that as you give it your best, you do everything you can to care for people, to support families. And there's a feeling, there's just so much against us. There's some, the pandemic is huge, right? It's not something that any of us can fix. But what we can do is we can recognize our human connection in every moment, right? And we can recognize the value of just helping one another, supporting one another in an authentic and in a real way. That's some of the growth and some of the learning that's come out of this whole thing for me.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And I think, like you said, we'll get into later. I mean, there's been a lot of um, people expressing just feeling more deeper meaning in everything because of that. And I know a lot of our workers and staff, and as you mentioned, um, that's happened for them. It's just been terribly profound. And but along with that, let me just go to the next slide. There's a lot of people that have been experiencing trauma. And again, this is whether we're experienced this awful disease or lost someone or not. It just seemed like I remember last March, and I imagine a lot of you do. The beginning of March, I remember planning a get together, and my husband and I were supposed to go see a play, and it felt like within 3 days, maybe a little longer, but it felt like almost overnight, literally, everything came to a halt. You know, we couldn't we were in lockdown basically. Not only could we not get together, we were canceling plans left and right. It was like a jolt. Like we really shouldn't even be leaving the home, and then the suddenness, it just seemed like the losses, culminated. It just happened so quickly. And by the beginning of April, I know at the hospital, we had lost a lot of people, like every day, just 3 weeks later, like every day, we had tremendous amount of loss and deaths. And I can tell you, that so many people, especially healthcare workers, but pretty much people in general, are feeling sort of this feeling of trauma that's associated with this tremendous loss, with this grief. And I bring this up is because people have expressed to me um, that they can't understand why they're feeling things like insomnia. Sleeping is a very common issue. Immense irritability, a lot of fear, anxiety, absolute exhaustion, of course, sadness, and to some degree, this is almost like a traumatic reaction to what's going on. I've worked with a few people who've said that they've been having nightmares, or they will start to relax and then they almost feel themselves startled. And so I just want to also throw that in there because this was abrupt, this was intense. And even as we start to hear, well, only 3 more months. How often did we hear that in the beginning? Okay, well, let's make it to, what was it, 3 months, Memorial Day. Then the summer, things were going to change. And then we had more, more bad news, and now we have the vaccine. And that's not even as smooth as it really we want it to be, or it could be, or whatever. But we're kind of getting jolted. And I just bring this up again. A lot of this has to do with our own staff who are so traumatized, but it's something to take into consideration, even for our own selves. Again, more of a collective thing. So I bring that up. I also want to say it is treatable and it's very common. There's stuff we can do and we will do. So I want to say that too, because we're talking a lot about the challenges, but like Mason said earlier, there's a lot of good too. Right. So this I was just gonna Mason, I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about some of the shifts that we've had regarding some of the rituals around funerals and all that.
Yeah. I mean, the ways that we usually would mark death and its significance, and we would come together to support one another, most of those things we've been unable to do. So if you've lost someone, somebody who's died, we're not able to get together, right? I know funeral homes were inundated in the spring, and they were struggling to figure out how they were going to permit people, and just a few people here and there at the funeral home, drive-bys at the cemetery with just a few people outside physically distant from one another. We need to hug each other. We need to cry on each other's shoulder. We need to, in my family, everybody would get together and, have a party and, celebrate the person that's died. So we're not, we haven't been able to do as much of that stuff, if any. We've done some of it through the computer, and that does, we did a memorial service here at the hospital over the computer in April or May, I think, when we had reached our 300th death. And it was meaningful to people. People watched it, they tuned in, people cried. It was a way to mark the passage of time, to recognize the loss we had felt. A lot of people had turned pretty easily to the religious communities online. The ways that we usually would mark death by coming together, we haven't been able to do these things, right?
Yeah. And it's impacted grieving for some, for many. How many of us, if you think back on losses you've had in your life, as much as it's very difficult to go through a wake or a funeral or Shiva, there's also something very consoling about that, and it marks like a closure, and that's very powerful, a closure to a degree, and not being able to experience that has really contributed to grieving. On the other hand, I have to tell you a couple positive stories I've heard, and I know Mason has too. This one, this one gentleman who had a sort of a funeral via Zoom. What the family said was it was just so beautiful because they were able to make use of the technology through Zoom. Were they able to really have everybody watch this beautiful, kind of like a PowerPoint, but it was a tribute to this gentleman on via online, via Zoom, and also so many more people were able to attend than probably would have usually been able to attend because they didn't have to travel. So that was interesting to hear a couple of people talk about that type of perspective, and we've heard that. So always looking for a little bit of that silver lining. It's still been hard, but for some it's been okay, and it's something, and we're actually getting used to it, I guess, right, Mason? You'd say people are adjusting a little bit more.
Yeah, religious services online is a lot of people have been doing that. Yeah, it's difficult.
Not the same.
It's difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. We're missing that. So along these lines, we want to talk a little bit about, so we're dealing with grief. It's been pretty overwhelming. How do we cope? How are we getting through? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that right now. And I would say that the number one important thing if you hear anything today, I think it's like Mason's touched on it before. It's so important to acknowledge the loss, you know, to acknowledge your grief, and to be able to, if you're, sitting here right now and you're feeling tense in your body, or maybe this is bringing up like, discomfort and you're feeling, this in your stomach or in your jaw or your shoulders. I just think it's so important to be able to acknowledge that discomfort. Because if we aren't aware of something, we can't really do a lot about it. To claim that loss, it's sort of a number one important. Um, and you're probably of the ilk to do that because you're even participating in this lecture right now. But again, I think, like I said before, if we don't deal with stuff that kind of deals with us, it comes out in other ways. We're finding that a lot with our staff. Some of them are just very sad, or they're angry or irritated, or they don't feel well. And, when we've been doing some sessions, Mason and I do, where we're sitting with them, they're talking about just, oh, you know what, this is just really, really difficult and it's grief and it's been hard. So that's really important, guys, if I can say anything. Mason talked about this before. Connection is just incredibly powerful right now. So of course we have to what? All we hear is social distancing. But it's really not social distancing, it's physical distancing. Thank goodness again, silver lining. Well, this happened in 2020 and 2021, where we have use of technology, where we can connect with each other. And I really just want to emphasize that this is so incredibly important regarding healing and coping. Whether it be, a phone call, good old use of phone, which I've really been enjoying with people. I have visits every week with different family members and friends, or texting each other or emailing, seeing each other outside or getting on a Zoom call or Facebook Messenger or whatever your social media is. But sharing with others about what you're going through, recognizing this is a collective sorrow. On a lot of the units at the hospital that have been so affected by COVID, which most everyone has, we talk about people just talking around the water cooler, just that peer support. And it's really gotten people through. And I think that's true for us in the community, just to be able to talk to others. Some people will say, well, I'm an introvert. I don't really, it doesn't matter if you're an introvert or not. We still need people. Like Mason said, we're social beings, and that's how one of the ways we heal. Being creative about getting together. If we can't connect, the typical ways, again, I keep saying Zoom. I'm sure there's other ways, but um, whatever, house party or whatever it is, just getting creative. I know that I love this story. Very dear friend of ours lives in an apartment complex, and everyone's got a balcony. And I think they're still doing it, but at 7 o'clock every evening, to kind of like honor all the people that were, working so hard to keep us healthy, and the first responders, they would all go out, bang pots and pans, and then somebody would play a song. And there was a lot of people out in the balcony just getting together and connecting. And this gentleman, this friend of ours who lives alone, said it was just so healing. It got him through a lot, especially the worst of it. So just being creative again, in every way any way we can. I mentioned this before. Well, I think I mentioned this. Maybe I didn't. Journaling is something that has been in the research, has been strongly recommended. Just whether it be in your phone, preferably, if you can write in a journal or a notebook or something, about what you're feeling, even physically. That's where it all starts. My back has been hurting. I have butterflies in my stomach, so on and so forth. Writing about it, trying to identify what's going on with yourself, what's on your mind. First of all, it helps you with sleep. Second of all, it's interesting just to see where your progress that you've made over time, because a lot of people are finding that too. Or, I worked with a woman who said she's going to write a memoir about this, because really, this has been an unprecedented time and hopefully it won't happen for a long time again. So the stories are very important, but that's been very helpful. Using what we call the strengths perspective, really looking at your strengths and how you've been through a lot. I'm sure every single person, with us tonight has dealt with so much. How did you cope before? What did you do to get through those difficult times? 9/11, that was a horrid time. And how did you get through that? A loss. You can do that again. Maybe it's your spirituality, or it's exercising, or going to counseling, and that's my next thing is, if there's more help that is needed and you're really struggling, I really encourage getting some, whether it be professional help, or going to a pastor, rabbi, priest, online support group, or going to a therapist, or asking your doctor, medical doctor, for something to help you with some really intense anxiety. That's okay. It has been, I don't know if you've read articles, but it is so prevalent right now that people are reaching out and getting some assistance because, again, as we've really been emphasizing, this has been hard. And then last but not least, I'm going to let Mason talk a little bit about gratitude.
I wanted to share a little story before when you talked about the banging of the pots and pans, the first all through the spring. I live in the city, and it took a little while for it to catch on. It didn't start right away. And I live in the Bronx, like I say, so just like a little bit out of the really busy area where it got really noisy with the pots and pans. And I remember when it picked up, I was like, oh yeah, let's do that, kids. I got my kids out to the window, and we started banging on some pans. And some lady hollered out from the ground floor next door. She was like, "Quit that racket! What are you going on about?" And I was like, we're celebrating the essential workers. And we just kept banging, and she was like, okay. Classic New York scenario. And then it took off, and that's been a big difference between this first wave and the second wave, is that there's no pop banging the second wave. Like the feeling of like camaraderie and like we're all in this together. It's a little bit more diffuse, right? So the energy is a little bit less there for this like drive to get through. But I want to talk about gratitude as a matter of perspective and a matter of how you view the day-to-day goings on in your life and what you focus on as a tool to help you get through hard stuff, right? So being able to pick up on the good things that are going on in our lives, take note of them, and recognize to feel some gratitude for them is something that is scientifically proven to improve resilience, to help well-being, help you feel happier. So specifically, there's this thing called the 3 good things, which is a intervention that's came out of the Duke Center for Healthcare Safety and Quality. And they did, so the idea is that at the end of each day, you sit down and you take note of 3 things that happened today that were good, 3 good things in your life today. And it's helpful if they're things that you've somehow had a hand in, right? So recognizing not just that it was a beautiful day, but that I stepped outside and took a breath and really appreciated the beauty of the day. So here's the reason that's so important, and the reason it's so effective is that our brains are hardwired to amplify dangerous things. So it's a survival mechanism that has maintained in our brain. So if there's something that is dangerous or threatening or something like that, our brain is going to amplify it, and our brain is going to remember it. And so if something reminds us of that in the future, it's going to signal us, it's going to trigger us. Now, we don't have the same sort of biological imperative to recognize the good things, the warm things, the kind things that are happening in our lives, but they are present, right? And so during these times that we're in right now, there's just a lot of negativity, a lot of bad news, and it's very easy for that stuff to take up an outsized amount of space in our brains, in our consciousness, in our perspective. So here's the idea. At the end of each day, you sit down, maybe you write it down on a piece of paper. I had a great conversation with my kid today. I heard a story on the news that really warmed my heart. I called my mom, you know, whatever, small things. You just take note of them. And then here's the part that I love is that it takes a minute, but you ruminate on the feeling of those things, right? So you sort of marinate in the goodness that's coming from those things. And if you do that each day, so the research that I've seen is that if you do that each night for 2 weeks, that your improvement to your mood, your happiness, decrease in scores for depression, that stuff lasts not just for the 2 weeks, not just for 6 months, but up to a year out from the 2 weeks where you're doing it. There's still improvements that are comparable to like if you were taking antidepressant medication. So there's like really solid evidence that this small intervention can have a big impact on your attitude, on your perspective. And nowadays, we might have a little bit more time or space in our lives. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're like my wife and you're stuck at home with the kids all day trying to work. So the idea of like, adding something extra in is difficult to fathom. But maybe you can find a small moment to take note of something good that's happening in your life, to amplify it in your brain space, in your heart space. And so then when those good things do happen the following day, the following week, you're more likely to take note of them. They're more likely to take root in your heart. They're more likely to take up space in your consciousness. And there's a way that we create the world that we live in, right? So if we see the negativity, if we come to the world expecting hardship and we come to the world just ready for, bad news, that's what we're going to see. You find what you look for, right? So, and if you come to the world knowing that there is goodness in it, knowing that even on difficult days, there's beauty and there's joy and there's love that shines through, you're going to see those things. You're going to find those things. It's all a matter of shifting your perspective.
Yeah.
So increasing gratitude by taking note of good things is just one tool for, for coping, for getting through this hardship that we're all facing right now.
Yep. And a very powerful one,
Yeah.
which leads us to the, kind of like a growth mindset, which leads us to sort of our final slide, where we're talking a little bit about sort of this new world, the idea of resilience, getting through things, and something called PTG, or post-traumatic growth, which just like kind of looking back at this time and trying to put things in perspective. What have we learned? How have we changed? When people, I remember a long time ago, I read somewhere someone said, when you go through really difficult things, you either get bitter or you kind of get better. You kind of, it hopefully changes you for the good, and even though we're still going through a very difficult time, um, there are a lot of lessons, as Mason alluded to in the beginning. We're looking at a lot of challenges and a lot of different things that we're grieving, but on the same token, there's been changes.
Yeah.
Right, Mason? Just there's been some shifts.
Totally. And the thing that I keep coming back to is what is within my control, right? Because there's so much with the pandemic that's just out of our control. We can't plan like we're used to. Every day the news is different. There's new strain coming in. We don't have control over those things, right? But I do have control over my own perspective and what's in my heart, what I choose to focus on, how I choose to approach each day. And
Mm.
so I can choose to be overwhelmed by all of this stuff. I can choose to be angry that I can't travel the way I'd like to, or I can't do the things I want to do, or I can see what's good in my life. I can choose to foster loving relationships that I'm able to. I can choose to find meaning and purpose in the small things in my life. I can choose to care for myself. I can choose to just focus on what's important. It's the sense in which we're sort of hitting the reset button. Like everything's paused, and now rather than as things have slowly opened back up, or as we anticipate things slowly opening back up, God, especially around Christmas and the holidays, man, I do not want to go back to that, like, Christmas, I'm gonna get so much stuff, I'm gonna be so busy, I'm gonna feel like, you all, we all do it. You just we get this feverish pace on to make it the best day ever, and then by the time it gets here, we're all cranky and tired, and we get sick because we're so tired, and it's like we bring that on ourselves every year. It's like, is that what it's about? Is that what we're celebrating for? And it's like, well, not really. I'd love to focus on love and compassion and what's important in this life. And when I'm running around every single night trying to get into the store and wait in line for this and that, it distracts me from my family and from caring for myself. And those are the things I want to focus on day to day.
Yeah, so many people have, including myself, have talked about just really thinking about, like you just said, what's important. What slowing down has been a big thing for a lot of people. I mean, we're kind of like human doings versus human beings, that, old saying, but just, so much urgency, and I think it's really shifted for a lot of people. I know, I have a daughter who was out living out west. And then when this all happened, she came home in July because she said, and, family's so important, connections are so important. I don't want to be so far away anymore. 25 years old, and there's been a lot of that, a lot of like kind of, looking at who's in your life, what's in your life. Um, I, for one, God, if I ever get out to dinner again, it's gonna be the greatest meal of my life. I'll never take advantage of that again. Um, but the slowing down and the connections being more meaningful. So there's a lot of lessons. I love this, resiliency is kind of, how do we get through day in and day out? Do you do the gratitude thing, or write something down, or exercise, or whatever? But post-traumatic growth is bigger and deeper. That's like, I'm stronger, I'm wiser, I'm changed from this. So take a moment to maybe think about that. What is your new world like? What's it about now? So important. I was just gonna just really quickly, and then Mason's gonna lead us in a sort of a relaxation for a couple minutes exercise, but just a couple of resources I thought might be helpful. John Kabat-Zinn is a favorite of mine. He writes a lot of books about mindfulness, which is a meditation practice, I should say, that really focuses on simply being in the present. There's a, full catastrophe living. Wherever you go, there you are. Books you could get, Barnes and Noble, Amazon. Very, very just good reflection books. I don't know if you can see that. It's another book called Coping with the Coronavirus: How to Stay Calm and Protect Your Mental Health. A psychologist by the name of Dr. Brendan Kelly. Um, he's written that and talked a little bit about, some of the things we were talking about tonight. And then I think of like the apps on my phone, just I know I've been using Calm, which is an app to help with sleeping, and a meditative practice, something similar called Headspace, Simple Habit. And then there is an app for, right, Mason, the three good things. I couldn't connect the whole, but it is, if you look on there, you can probably find that.
Yep,
And
just in the App Store, three good things. It's
yeah,
great. It sends you just a reminder whenever you schedule a reminder. It sends you a little reminder on your phone. What are three good things that happened today? You just click in it and type them in. It's super easy, and then you can go back and you can look at the good things and you can ruminate on it.
right,
It's great.
good things.
So we had talked about doing the little reflection and then taking questions, but I think I'd like to take questions first and then close with the reflection. And Harm, I think, is
Yeah.
going to read question for us.
Yes. First, I just want to thank you both for this really informative perspective that is so relevant right now with everything that's going on. I see one question and I see one comment. So I'm going to start with the question. What is your approach to treating trauma?
Good question. Yeah. So mean, I think it depends upon um, the origin of the, more specifics, but um, I definitely think that some trauma requires professional, assistance. Absolutely. It kind of depends. I do think that a meditative practice is proven to be very, very helpful. If you're feeling some trauma, um, trying to start, again, I mentioned some apps there, or a book like something on mindfulness. I think that is a good place to start. I think writing and journaling is also very important regarding trauma. I do believe, though, um, certain traumas do require some professional assistance. It's a heavy thing. It really is, and a lot of people right now, whether it be virtual or in person, a lot of therapists who are providing assistance with that. Actually, there's a site. If you just go to Psychology Today and look for like a psychologist who or a social worker who is trying to assist with trauma. That's a great resource. The other thing that has been proven to be very helpful are some online support groups. And again, it depends upon what the issue is. There is a something called the Self-Help Clearinghouse, and they have, if you go and you can Google it, they have a list of whatever your issue is, whether it be anxiety or trauma. You write down what you're looking for, and then most of the groups are virtual right now, but they will provide you with some resources. And Mason, what do you? Any ideas?
Trauma of a COVID-19 loss of spouse. Well, you know, my work is based in the hospital, so the work that I'm doing is mostly with people who are hospitalized and family members of those folks, as well as these days supporting staff. So not a therapist by any means. However, um, my practice is based in giving people a safe space to talk about what's on their heart when they're prepared to talk about it. So I'm definitely not trying to force anybody into talk about something they're not ready. Sue and I have done a number of groups where we get met with silence, and we don't take that personally. We don't feel like we're not doing our job because people aren't opening up to us. But the nature of trauma is that there's natural reactions, natural protections against it. And so sometimes people are not able to access the experience of the trauma. I really believe in being with people in quiet and in silence, in gentleness, as sort of an avenue to permit an opening up and a going to that difficult place. Now, for somebody who's experienced the loss of a loved one to COVID, I don't know. This is a real hardship. And so much of what Sue and I have talked about today is stuff that makes what's already an incredibly difficult loss even more difficult. If you can't be around, your family to support you, you can't get out to do the things you would like to be doing. I would definitely direct folks towards the support groups. We've got a really good COVID support group. I think I think there's a new cohort starting up in March, if I'm not mistaken. They do like for that group, I think folks to be about 2 months out from the loss. They don't want it to be too fresh, because it's harder to engage with a group if the loss is still really fresh.
A lot of bereavement support groups through our hospice program. If you go to Valley, www.valley.com, and there is, I'm trying to picture it, forgive me. I think there is a section where there are some like community resources and support groups They will list them. There's a list of all the groups. I'm trying to picture it right now. I know Parmenter, it can picture it better than me.
Parmenter's got it.
Okay.
Oh, that's
Just
the
put it
Valley
into the
website.
chat.
Thank you. I knew she would. So it's a place to start.
I saw somebody else say that they had been in one of those support groups and that it was really helpful. You know, one of the ways I like to think about sadness and difficulty is, are you going to turn away from it? Are you going to turn your back on it? Or are you going to turn towards it? Right? And when something is really, really difficult, it's very hard to turn towards it and to face it and to accept it and to open yourself up to it. And sometimes it requires help. I think about this in relationship to like my relationship with my spouse, is that when she's struggling, am I going to turn my back on her? Am I going to feel angry or bitter, or am I going to turn towards her and help her through? That's another way that I like to think about, just helping each other through struggle, through hardship.
Okay. And then I just see one other comment here in the Q&A, and it says, "Hi, I don't have a question, but wanted to share that I experienced a loss, my dad in Florida, on March 5th, unrelated to COVID. Since that time, I haven't been able to visit or see my family, and I'm feeling like my grief is somewhat diminished by the suffering at large in the world. That has helped, but also been painful."
Of course, absolutely. Not be able to make that connection after that profound loss of your father. So sorry.
Yeah, so sorry to hear about your loss of your dad. And during this time, like I said, it makes it that much more difficult. Comparing to the loss in the larger world, that's totally natural to do. It's hard to recognize that my suffering is important, and it's the weight that you carry is gosh, I'm not sure how to say it. So often when I'm taking care of people, they say, "Oh, it could be so much worse," or I see all the other people in the hospital and they must be so bad, or those are ways to sort of, sometimes those perspectives can be helpful. They can help put people in perspective. I'm wary of those perspectives. I think sometimes they diminish what you're feeling like. That was your word. It was diminished, and I think it's important to recognize your hardship is yours to carry, and how you carry it is up to you. You don't carry anybody else's weight but your own, and
Yep.
that's your own personal challenge. Yeah.
Tough loss.
I wish I had something better to say for you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I don't believe I see any other questions or comments here, so thank you.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for sharing some of those really vulnerable comments. And this is hard stuff. And I thank you for being with us. We got to turn towards our suffering. We got to recognize that it's there. It's not going away. And we got to work together to help relieve that suffering and help our world to be better, Oh, we got one more. Let's see. I recently lost one of my best friends to COVID, and the pain is unbearable. My heart will never be the same. I pray for strength and guidance.
I'm sorry.
I pray for strength and guidance for you too. There's more. Yeah, it's unbearable. We cannot take it all in at once. That's the thing. Like, sometimes we've got to distract ourselves. We've got to do something frivolous. We've got to do something fun and distracting. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And you do that with the knowledge that, I'm going to come back to this. It's not going away. Having a night with my,
Yeah. Balance. It's a balance. It has to be. It's survival, right?
Oh, I'm seeing another one. It says, I'm 85 and I start each day when I wake saying, I'm glad I'm here and the sun is shining and I will be positive about life no matter what happens. And I get through you covered it all. Oh, thanks.
Oh, thank
That's
you.
wonderful. I hope I have such a positive attitude when I'm
I was just
85.
gonna say, that's
I,
wonderful.
yeah. So the sun isn't shining every day, but um, sometimes the clouds are nice too. I do love the sun. Yeah. I wake up and say to Alexa, Alexa, play Oh, What a Beautiful Morning. Nice.
It's a good one.
That is a good one. That's a good song. Is it the
Great.
Cat Stevens version? Yeah. Thank you guys for being so amazing and for helping us get through the most difficult moments of my life. I've had a long and tough week, but just listening to your voices and stories is like soup for the soul.
Oh,
Bless you and thank you for giving us the gift of hope and peace. You guys, that's such a gift for us too. It's to hear you know, to hear your gratitude in that way, it's really meaningful to me and it really fills me with hope and peace.
Yep.
Thank you.
that connection, right, Mason?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. It's like a good therapy session. All the good stuff comes up right in the last couple minutes.
All right.
Thank you guys again so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I want to just close us with a brief sort of a meditation to help us sort of just seal in all the goodness and all the stuff that's come up for us. So participate at will, how you like with this. I just invite you to come to a nice upright seated posture as much as you're able. Put your feet flat on the floor. Close your eyes if you're comfortable doing that, if you're in a place where that's safe. Take a couple of nice deep breaths. And just tune into your body. Just see what's going on inside. One of the things about trauma is that it comes out, we process it in layers and levels. And one of those levels before it gets to our mind and our heart is through our bodies. So it's really important that we tune into our bodies. We attend to aches or pains, places that seem like they need attention. Let's give ourselves some loving care and energy right now. So I invite you just to call to mind one good thing in your life right now. It could be the smallest little thing, this little acorn of goodness just hanging out under the dirt, whatever it is. Just a small thing, a sliver of goodness, just something, anything. Maybe it's a show you're watching right now. Whatever, it's something that's bringing you laughter, or joy, or happiness. And I just invite you to just tune into what it is about that that's working for you right now. Just notice it and just set it on your heart. Just feel the goodness and the light and the happiness, whatever it is. Maybe it's sadness. Maybe you're feeling the joy breaking through in some sadness or some other difficult thing. They're all bound together. So just breathe into that and feel it on your heart. And just feel it grow and just know that the tiniest little seed in there, the tiniest little sun ray peeking through the clouds, oh, it can just fill it right up. It can grow until it's just all over your body and it's in your mind and your heart and your connections and your relationships and your work and your kids and your dog and your garden and your whatever. So we just appreciate whatever that good thing is, and we just lift it up, and we just know that on the hardest day we can turn to it, and we can peek through the crevice of our dark cave, and we can see that there's some light out there. All right, so you can open your eyes. You can just take another deep breath. You can thank yourself for being with us today and taking this journey. And we're just so glad you've been with us. And we just thank you. And thanks.